everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Tony, we are here for the sequel, and as we all know, part 2 always better than part 1, and everyone's always more excited to talk about the defense and the offense. So, smash, unparalleled, unprecedented smash hit, most popular show in history? Maybe.
Possibly. And that's really all we are on the show is about possibilities. And the possibility today is we are going to give you 5 possible breakout Buckeyes on defense. And the thing is, all of these guys that we're mentioning, they better break out or else Ohio State is going to be not necessarily in trouble, but there could be games where they are in trouble if some of these guys don't break out, Tom. And for me, I'm going to start because I let you start on offense. You hogged the entire show. Went way over. So we're just 5 minutes tops, and then we're out of here. The guy that I'm going to say first, and it's not the first guy that I have written down, but this may be the most important guy that needs to break out, because if he doesn't, then I think the Ohio State defense overall is going to suffer for it, but I'm going to say Eddrick Houston. And this is a guy with very few stats to his credit. As really, he played more and more as the season went on once he became the backup 3-tech to Tyleik Williams. But I don't think to this point he still has no tackles for loss in his 15 snaps a game over the course of the second half of the season. And the way we talk about him, where it's just understood, like, yeah, he's the starter, he's going to be that guy. It feels a little, I don't know, dangerous or just over-assumptive, which is a word, Tom, where we just assume things are going to be fine with him and Kayden McDonald at nose tackle. And there's all of the reason in the world to like Eddrick Houston. And we talked in the past about how he became the backup after just the bye week. But also, that's also a result and a product of who was also there at defensive tackle, and nobody stood in his way. So the idea that he's just going to be outstanding, I think, is a hope and an assumption. But he's also, is he just the starting 3-tech by default? I think there's a possibility there. Now, that doesn't mean that he isn't going to stand out and be a guy, but I do think he needs to break out. And I'm throwing this kind of warning out there, but he's also supposed to be my first pick to break out. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that he will. Now, what does that mean? I mean, making plays, getting into the backfield. I didn't go back like with the offense and say, well, what's the average number for the 3-tech over the last few years? Because, I could just tell you if he has 45 tackles and 8 tackles for loss and 3 or 4 sacks, I think you'll take that right now. I just have no idea what to expect. But for the sake of the Buckeyes, he better be on this list.
He'd better be on this list, and I'm just going to move right into my first one, which is Kayden McDonald, who is lots of the same stuff that you just said, except one spot over on the line. Because between the two of them, they had 26 tackles last year, 19 for Kayden McDonald, 7 for Eddrick Houston, 1.5 tackles for loss. That was all Kayden McDonald, nothing for Eddrick Houston, no sacks. That's it. That's the interior of the defensive line. And so there's really not a lot of proven depth there. It feels, Kayden McDonald's someone where he's been around for a while, and you've seen him do it in some big moments. They put him in, for example, in the goal line stand against Penn State at the end of that game. He's been on the field for some big plays, but he hasn't been called on to be the guy there. You look at those numbers, 26 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and you compare it to Ty Hamilton last year, who we constantly talked about as this incredibly underappreciated player. Ty Hamilton, 51 tackles, 6 tackles for loss last year. Tyleik Williams, 46 tackles, 8 tackles for loss. So between those two guys, 96 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. If they get that kind of production out of those two guys, out of Kayden McDonald and out of Eddrick Houston this year, I think Matt Patricia would take that with a smile on his face. Now, the question at defensive tackle, you talked about whether this was, this is someone who's sort of the next guy up and it's just sort of by default. Yeah, to a certain degree, yes. they feel Eddrick Houston and Kayden McDonald. They feel like they're a little more proven than they probably are, just because you kind of go, yeah, they don't have anyone proven in terms of big numbers returning in the middle of the defensive line, and everyone kind of goes, yeah. But the real concern is the guys behind them. And so a lot of the focus has been on the guys who are the depth guys at defensive tackle and how unproven they are. And compared to that, Eddrick Houston and Kayden McDonald feel like they are probably going to be, they are relatively sure things in the interior defensive line. And I feel like they're going to be, I don't have a question that those two guys are good enough. I don't have a question that those two guys are going to be really rock solid at the beginning of games. My biggest question with them is how well are they going to hold up if they're asked to play way more snaps than the starters were this time last year, because the depth isn't really there. They don't have an Eddrick Houston and a Kayden McDonald behind Eddrick Houston and Kayden McDonald this year. That's where the question is. So I think they're going to be good. I think they're both going to have good, really solid, really productive seasons. It's really just a question of, and frankly, the numbers are going to be there because they're going to have to have, the numbers are going to have to be there. But boy, how well are those guys going to hold up over the course of the season? And that's really a factor of the guys behind them.
Kayden McDonald played 13 snaps a game last year on average. Eddrick Houston, once he moved to 3-tech, played 12 snaps a game on average. And you're going to need them to triple those numbers at least, maybe quadruple, and you're going to quadruple them to get where Ty Hamilton and Tyleik Williams were. If that's what you're looking for. And I'm going to be fascinated to see how much they sneak the defensive ends in there and how much rushman package they are playing, maybe even on some running downs to steal some snaps from the interior. So I think both of those two guys, go ahead and put them at the top of the list. If those two guys are breakouts, then you're going to feel so much, Ohio State fans are going to feel so much better about the situation. And you're right. Like, those two guys are, they're a house on the block where, you could have some questions, but there's another house that's on fire. So it's like you're just so focused by this blaze over here that you haven't noticed that this one over here is maybe a little rickety, and you're not sure that it should be leaning like that. But it's easy to be distracted by the bigger concerns. But I think this is a big enough concern, but one where you at least know something about these players because you've seen them. We've seen Kayden McDonald and Eddrick Houston play in big moments. So I think that alleviates some of the concern, but we've never seen him do it over the course of 50 snaps in a game, and we soon will. Tom, I'm going to stay on the defensive line because I'm going to go with Kenyatta Jackson, who, he's already broken out. He's been around forever. He had, he's got 25 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks in his career. 25 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3 sacks in his first 3 seasons. And so, to me, he'll do better. He'll better than all of those numbers this year. He'll have more than 25 tackles. He'll have more than 6 tackles for loss. He'll have more than 3 sacks. And again, he needs to. But this is also going to be the first time where we get to really see him be part of the defense. He's played, I'm just looking at his snap numbers from last year. He has played more than 20 snaps in exactly 2 Big Ten games in his career, or at least last year. I assume it's going to be the same previous as well. Now, he played 23 snaps and 22 snaps in the first 2 playoff games, but those are blowouts. So he's never actually really done a lot in the Big Ten schedule as well. And the production certainly hasn't been there. There's times where it looks really good and it looks really close. How many times did we say that about Zach Harrison over the years? It's like, ooh, Jalen Holmes, like, ooh, man, that was so close. He was right there. Kenyatta Jackson, for the Buckeyes' sake, needs to go beyond being so close. And, everybody, the way that his former teammates have talked about him, they all expect him to step up and be that guy at defensive end for Ohio State this year. So I am going with him as a breakout defender for the Buckeyes.
I feel like I look at Kenyatta Jackson and I think all the same stuff that I think about Kayden McDonald, where it's just he feels more proven than he probably is, where he was in so many of those big moments towards the end of last season. he's playing in the first half of the national championship game. How unproven can he be? And then you look at the stats, and it's 3 tackles for loss and 1.5 sacks. It's like, boy, I feel like I can remember more than 1.5 sacks for him last year. But there the numbers are in black and white. He's someone who the potential's there. How well is he going to hold up in the run game against, our team's going to just try and run right at him, because he's not the biggest guy, and he's someone who brings a lot in terms of pass rush, I think, and I think with more snaps you're going to see a lot of production out of him this year, but you haven't seen it yet just because he had JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer ahead of him last year. So yeah, I think he's a good selection, and we're going to have to do more than 5, because I also have a defensive lineman that I wanted to get to in terms of a breakout guy. And there is a back 7 on the defense this year as well. So we're going to have to get to some of those guys, but we do need to talk about Beau Atkinson, because he's sort of in the Max Clare mold to me, where there's not another guy at his position where it's like, this is a proven guy who's definitely going to be a number 1 at this position. And you saw a lot of production at it's a lower level. The ACC is not what the Big Ten is. And going up against teams that North Carolina plays, you're not going up against Penn State or Texas or Michigan or teams like that very often. But Beau Atkinson was really effective. He had 7.5 sacks last year for North Carolina, and he had 3.5 the year before that. 12 tackles for loss last year, 5 the year before that. 12 tackles for loss and 5 sacks. I mean, that's Cody Simon was 12.5 tackles for loss last year. That's a pretty good, pretty productive season. And the only person ahead of him in terms of TFLs was JT Tuimoloau. Sonny Styles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. 12 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks for Beau Atkinson. That's pretty good. I mean, that's pretty good production. He's going to get the opportunities to play for Ohio State, but he's also not going to be, because they have a little more proven depth there, he's not someone who's going to get left out there for 60 snaps and potentially really get worn down. In fact, the fact that they're a little thinner on the interior of the defensive line, one of the ways they might get around that is by playing some of the defensive ends more situationally and playing a little bit more of that rush men package. So you're going to get more opportunities in obvious passing situations to put up some numbers. I think this year, defensive line, if you're asking me who is going to lead the defensive line in tackles for loss and sacks this year, I think I'm going to say Beau Atkinson's name for both and feel pretty good that I'm going to be right about at least one of them.
Yeah, he's the safest pick. And honestly, if he could, the 35 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, and 7.5 sacks he did last year, I think Ohio State would sign up for that right now. And just give us that, and we'll be good, and we'll get numbers from other places as well. But I could also see if he's as good as people say, and he can get some help from a defensive tackle to clear some things up for him and keep him unoccupied by multiple blockers and things like that, then there's no reason those numbers can't increase, other than the fact that they may have a 5-man rotation of some sort. We'll see how much that 5th guy gets out there, and see how really deep and even this rotation is, because back in 2017, I think, it was 2017, where the 4 defensive ends, all with Jalen Holmes, Sam Hubbard, Nick Bosa, and Tyquan Lewis, were all within like 6 snaps of each other that year. And that's how even those numbers were. And I wonder how close they'll get to it this year. One last thing on Kenyatta Jackson before I move on to my next guy, Tom. 10 tackles and 3.5 tackles for loss in his career in Big Ten games. So, that's not a lot. And so he's going to have to really pick it up. But again, no reason not to think that he can't or won't, but now is the time for him to do that. Tom, what if I go with, I've got 2 other guys here, and you know what? I'll just go to linebacker, Arvell Reese. He's some would say he's already broken out. I think he got a couple of spot starts last year. But, 43 tackles or so last year's.
43 tackles, 3.5 for loss, half of a sack. Yep.
Right. Those numbers are all going to be doubled. And I think if you double a number, like if you double your numbers, then that's kind of breaking out. I do expect him to double his more than double those numbers for him because he's going to be the number one middle linebacker. He's going to be involved in possibly as much backfield action as Cody Simon was. And the thing is, like, it also depends on how effective he is at that. Cody Simon was very, very effective at blitzing and just he was a success at it, and not as. And you look previously, Tommy Eichenberg was not as successful at it as Cody Simon was. But Tom, over these last 5 years, I went back and looked at the last 5 years of the starting middle linebacker for Ohio State. 85 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. It feels like over on all three of those for me for Arvell Reese.
Yeah, that's probably right on all of those. I mean, you look at it was 16 games last year, but both linebackers, Cody Simon and Sonny Styles, went over all three of those last year. They combined for 212 tackles, 23 tackles for loss, and 13 sacks. So, between those two, you're going to, if it's anything close to the level of production you got last year, you're probably looking at going over on all of those. And we had Arvell Reese listed, I think both of us maybe, on the list of just players we're most excited to see when we did that show a week or so back. He is just such an intriguing prospect, just so twitched up, so athletic, and has shown that he's, this is not a guy who it's like, he's incredibly athletic, but how is he going to handle things on the field? Like he was out there with the helmet radio, running the defense. Like, this is someone who has the physical ability, has the mental ability, he is ready to go this year and is really ready to have, I think, a really, really good season. I didn't have him on my list solely because I thought, it's kind of cheating. I think, well, I mean, not bold certainly, but that's certainly nothing new for this show. I do think, this is also kind of cheating. I kind of want to put the two safeties in here because I think Malik Hartford and Jalen McClain are both going to break out to a certain degree this year, because I think you're going to see different combinations of safeties at different times. And Malik Hartford 2 years ago looked like, oh man, this is going to be the guy. And if Caleb Downs hadn't transferred to Ohio State, Malik Hartford is probably one of the few returning starters on this team. So, but now you've got Malik Hartford coming in. He had 8 tackles last year, played in 13 games, but 8 tackles for him all of last year. And Jalen McClain, I'm scrolling down here, unless I missed him. He really did not have
15.
Particularly, here we go, 15 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. Between the two of them, that's 23 tackles, 1 tackle for loss. Between the two of them, that number is going to be 4x this year, probably. I mean, you're going to see a significant increase between the two of them. And I think you're going to see both of them get, I don't know what the true breakdown of like who is the out there for the first play of the game is going to be. But I think you're going to see both of those guys get kind of at least starter-ish snap numbers this year, where you're going to see they're going to be rotating, and there's going to be certain teams where it's going to be more beneficial to have McClain in there versus Hartford in there. But all of this kind of rotates around. Caleb Downs is the son in this heliocentric Ohio State safety model, where it's, what do you want to do with Caleb Downs in this game? Great. We have, the good news is you have a complimentary safety for whatever you want to do with Caleb Downs in this game. And they're going to ask him to do all sorts of stuff. I think they really like him close to the ball. So if I was going to guess, you're going to see more Malik Hartford, probably because you would prefer to have Caleb Downs playing a little closer to the ball, and have him more in that kind of bandit kind of role rather than the adjuster role, which I think they've probably changed the names for those this year. So we need to get the Jim Knowles terminology out of our heads. The deep safety versus the, Tony, we'll call it the free safety and the strong safety. Trademark, patent pending. No one else can use those terms. You're going to see more of probably Caleb Downs in that sort of strong safety role, because he's just so good close to the line of scrimmage and so good and such a sure tackler. But also, because he's such a sure tackler, he sure is good at the apex of that defense as well, and being that Jordan Fuller role. So they're going to want to mix and match what he does, and you want to be unpredictable with what he's going to do, because he's someone that opposing quarterbacks are going to be looking for. And if they know where he is, you can game plan around that. If he's all over the place, that makes it a lot harder. And they have plenty of other talent at safety to free him up to do that stuff.
And Matt Patricia has said they will look for ways to use all three of those safeties together, or at least use both Malik Hartford and Jalen McLean. And we know that Caleb Downs can do whatever you need. So whenever they want to play the other guy, then maybe you can move Caleb Downs back to free safety, or you move him down to strong safety, whatever, and you make it work out. Whatever those guys excel at, put them in the position to succeed. And I think that's part of the process that's going on this summer. My last guy, Tom, is Jermaine Matthews, who is going to...
Come on. Do you think I forgot about Jermaine Matthews, or do you think Jermaine Matthews was like basically a starter last year already? Come on.
Jermaine Matthews last year, 22 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack, no PBUs. So like if he has 1 PBU this season, that's a breakout because it's infinitely more numbers of PBUs. But did not start a game last year, did not play against Oregon. And so... and then after that was playing about, I think, 30 snaps a game. I wrote about him on Tuesday at BuckeyeHuddle.com. But he's going, and the reason, even my note here says he's going to go from 2 starts to all Big Ten. And so that, to me, that's all Big Ten at the very least. Like, that's a breakout season for me. When you are a new starter, Tom, which is one of the things we said at the start of the outset of this, I think being a new starter, you're going to pick Beau Atkinson and come after me for taking Jermaine Matthews. But I do expect him to be...
Did he play for Ohio State last year? None? Wow. Interesting.
Same number of PBUs. But I do think he's going to... Everybody thinks he's going to be fantastic this season, and I think a lot of people are going to know him who didn't know him. And so that is why he is my final pick of my 5 guys that I have written down here to be a breakout. I do think he's going to be all Big Ten, and a lot more people are going to know who he is after this season and during the season.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he, because of what he did during the playoff and the role that he played in some of those playoff games, I feel like he's probably a little further along in this process than other people. But yeah, if you just want to look at, he didn't have a PBU last year and he had 22 tackles. Yeah, his numbers last year were basically half of Davis and Igbinosun's numbers in terms of tackles and that kind of stuff. So yeah, the numbers are going to go up, but I feel like he's almost a little bit of a returning starter this year. Mm-hmm. And I think you could almost look at someone like Peyton Pierce, for example, who is going to go from really just a special teams guy, more or less, to he's going to be kind of in that Arvell Reese role this year as the third linebacker. Or Aaron Scott, who was really, really just kind of playing special teams and end of games and that kind of stuff last year. He's probably someone who you're going to see growing into maybe that Jermaine Matthews role this year. So yeah, I think you've got, and frankly, you might be having the Devin Sanchez conversation at some point this year where he might grow into that at some point this year. Not at the beginning, not going to be a starter this year. That's okay. Pump the brakes. The fact that we're having this conversation about him as a true freshman is a pretty good indication that I think Tony is nodding. So, I'm going to go ahead and speak for him and say, yeah, Tony is on board with the fact that, Devin Sanchez is going to be very good at some point. Pump the brakes. He's a true freshman, but I think he and Aaron Scott both have the opportunity to earn more playing time, especially as the season goes along and they can sort of show themselves ready and, that they are guys who can really, truly be trusted. Frankly, Bryce West could be in this conversation as well, because Bryce West could be someone who at least wins a share of, if not a rotational, splitting time kind of thing at that nickel position. So, Tony, now that I've named, I think 4 more guys, anyone else that you can think of, or do you not follow the team very closely?
Well, I'm thinking, does Lorenzo Styles or Bryce West need to be on this list for the Buckeyes to reach their pinnacle, because we know how important that position is? Or do they somehow use their 3 safeties that we've talked about earlier to fill out the role? I'm not saying like Jalen Matthews or Jalen McLean at nickel or whatever, but like the nickel position has been vitally important, and maybe it's Jordan Hancock has been vitally important. And so how do you replace him? And if you can get that out of Bryce West or Lorenzo Styles, then, that is what Ohio State fans should be hoping for. Like, how we've talked about when Ohio State didn't miss Malik Hooker because they had Jordan Fuller. If Ohio State doesn't miss Jordan Hancock this year, boy, I think they're going to go a long way.
For sure, yeah. If you can just replace the guys who everyone is sort of looking at right now and going, ooh, those are big shoes to fill. If you have guys who can step in and fill those shoes, that's where you have the conversation about, all right, now we can start talking about, can this team repeat? Because right now there's just so many holes on that defense. And right now there are a lot of questions on that defense. And I think you feel reasonably good about things, but everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Well, Texas is cocking its fist right now, and it's going to be 100 and whatever days, but you're not really going to know. You're going to go into that Texas game. The Ohio State defensive coaching staff is going to go into that Texas game with an idea of what they have, and they're going up against really good players in practice and all that kind of stuff. But you don't really know until you have a game. That's something Ryan Day's talked about this spring, just the challenge of there are only so many games, and you don't really, really know until you see stuff on the field. How is a quarterback going to handle 105,000 people in a national TV audience? I don't know. We'll find out. We'll all find out together on August 30th. And it's kind of the same thing for a lot of these guys on defense. But this is a team that is as well positioned as you can be, as just about anyone in the nation, to potentially have the answers to all of these questions. And then we'll find out if they are the correct answers as the fall kind of rolls on.
You mentioned Peyton Pierce earlier, and I just want to, we always compare him to Arvell Reese last year, Cody Simon the 2 years before then. Tom, the average number of Cody Simon and Arvell Reese in those 3 years, 44 tackles, which is a lot for a third linebacker, and 4 tackles for loss. So where are you on the Peyton Pierce thing? Because I think 44 tackles is a lot. Now, last year, Arvell Reese did that, essentially. Mm-hmm. The year before, Cody Simon had like 57. So it was, if we just take those 2 years, we're talking 50 tackles, which seems a lot for Peyton Pierce, because I think they're going to, they also want to get Arvell Reese established and get him comfortable out there. But I think it wouldn't shock me to see him over 4 tackles for loss, but 44 tackles seems a bit high for me.
That does seem like a lot, and some of it is going to depend on, they've got some real talented third linebacker pair there as well this year with the true freshmen. You figure Peyton Pierce and Garrett Stover are probably the second string linebackers right now, at least coming out of spring. We'll see. Garrett Stover missed a bunch of time with an ankle or a foot thing. So, but you've got some really talented true freshmen there as well with Riley Pettyjohn and TJ Alford, where those guys could potentially, we'll see how they want to manage the snaps and manage the games and the red shirt stuff and all that. But those are guys who could potentially earn bigger roles. So that could take some of the snaps away from the twos. So yeah, I'll say under on the tackles and over on the tackles for loss on 44 and 4.
So there you go. A bunch of breakout defenders for the Buckeyes. One last thing as we go, I just want to let everybody know, like Kevin Noon and Mark Kivler have been out on the road on the Southern Swing, just killing it, talking to all of these Ohio State prospects, Tom. And when I tell you that they were at Chaminade Madonna talking with a 6'4", 215-pound wide receiver who is a 2028 kid, I'm like, are we already rerunning these old stories of, there's this kid named Jeremiah Smith at Chaminade Madonna. He's this 2024 recruit. You'll see him one day. And now they're like, yeah, there's 2028 Peter Pierre, 6'4", 215 pounds, and just apparently the next big thing. And so they've been out there talking to all of the next big things, and they've got all of that at BuckeyeHuddle.com right now. Mark has been talking to so many guys, and they've got videos and stories there at BuckeyeHuddle.com, and of course YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. I would recommend checking that out. If you're into recruiting at all, they've got it all covered, all kinds of updates, and Ohio State's looking good for a lot of these guys that they've been talking to. So you can find that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. We would appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. Hit the bell to be notified. And, of course, as I said, you can always find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. $4.99 for your first month. Check the entire team out. You got me and Tom and Kevin covering the team, Mark Givler and Jeremy Birmingham covering recruiting, all of our X's and O's guys, and Ross Fulton just doing their thing, making you, as Tom always says on the morning show, a smarter football fan. And we know that Tom can always use that. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.